Welcome to The Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thank you for joining us. It's a common misconception that daylight saving time was created to give farmers an extra hour of sunlight for fieldwork. The reality is, its history goes much deeper than that. During World War I, the United States established the Standard Time Act of 1918 to modernize our time zones and require sunrise and sunset to happen later in warmer months. The goal of this first version of what we came to know as daylight saving time was to conserve fuel and energy. It was repealed after the war, but reinstated in 1966 through the Uniform Time Act. It's been in place for all but about 10 months since then, except for a short blip of less than a year in the 1970s. However, the system is up for debate again in today's Congress with House Bill 139, known as the Sunshine Protection Act. This would make daylight saving time permanent. It's been passed by the U.S. House and now awaits consideration by the U.S. Senate. It's a topic that's often fiercely debated, tied to sleep cycles and safety concerns. Some people think our current system remains the best option, despite the fact that, let's be honest, annoyingly, it calls for adjusting our car clocks and microwaves 2 times a year, in March and November. Today, we'll hear from health experts, a national reporter, and an education advocate on how daylight saving time affects our bodies and our communities, and the arguments for and against permanently changing our clocks. With me in studio today, we have Heather Trunka, Injury Prevention Manager with Akron Children's Hospital. Heather, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Also with us, we have Scott Carlo, Executive Director of Ohio Public School Advocacy Network. Scott, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me here.
Also joining us on video, we have Dan Diamond, who is the White House reporter for the Washington Post. Dan, welcome.
Glad to be here.
Now, if you have thoughts on how our clocks should or shouldn't change, you can give us a call at 866-578-0903. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org, or you can message us on Instagram. We're at The Sound of Ideas. Let's start with Dan. Dan, the Sunshine Protection Act has passed in the House. The Senate reconvenes on August 7th, so it could consider it soon. How serious do you think this attempt to make daylight saving time permanent is? And can you tell us a little bit about how often this has moved through Congress?
I think this is a very serious effort. It has the backing of President Trump, who has stumped for it in public and in private. We know that the Senate is open to passing this kind of legislation. They did it a couple of years ago. And the House has essentially achieved half the job by getting the legislation through. I think what makes this a little different than the last time the Senate passed the Sunshine Protection Act a few years ago, that time it was a little bit of a sneak attack by the advocates for this legislation. They really wanted to get permanent daylight saving time done, and they used a maneuver that caught many senators by surprise. They did essentially a voice vote that led some senators to say if they'd known this was happening, they might have stopped it. This time there is organized resistance. Tom Cotton, a Republican who often agrees with President Trump, has vowed to do everything in his power to stop this bill from becoming law. So there is going to be a fight ahead, but the fact that it has made it this far and has the backing of the president, to me, makes it pretty serious. And in terms of how often this has happened, I've been covering this for about 5 years. I think the battle over daylight saving time goes back before I was born. 50 years ago, there was an effort by Congress, and they succeeded in getting permanent daylight saving time. And since then, there have been fights back and forth over how much sunshine we need and what the right times would be to shift back and forth. So this has been a hot issue in some respects, a sleepy issue in other ways. But it is also an issue that touches every American in some way, and I think that's why it keeps coming up.
Dan, I want to ask you about why do you think the timing is ripe for it right now? Do you think it's the support from the president? We know that lawmakers in Florida and others like Senator Ted Cruz have been pushing for permanent daylight saving time. As you mentioned, it's been for some time now. So why this moment, and is it more geographical than political, would you say?
So I think this moment is about a few things. First, it has been an issue that has been discussed and debated pretty intensely in Congress and in public the past few years. There was this effort several years ago where the legislation made it through the Senate, and that prompted a reexamination, I think, by all policymakers. Was this a change that they wanted or not? So lawmakers have had some time to think it through. They've heard from voters around the country with very strong opinions. And we have a president in Trump who has made it a priority. I was at the White House a few weeks ago talking to officials who said that earlier that day, President Trump had brought it up unsolicited in a meeting. He wanted to know what was happening with this legislation. Now, whether it should be a priority or not, it is. And that means that the president, by putting pressure on lawmakers, we're also hearing from voters. I think that's created new momentum. This
Mm.
issue, too, of the political versus geographic alliances, that has always been interesting to me. This idea that it's not just Republicans who want it, it's Democrats like Patty Murray in Washington State or Ed Markey in Massachusetts, who live in areas of the country where if we had year-round daylight saving time, they might tend to benefit more than folks in the middle of the country, perhaps like in Ohio or in Indiana or Michigan, where the sun would come up later in the morning and just crunch the day in ways that voters there and lawmakers there don't particularly enjoy.
Mm. We do know that daylight saving time was made permanent under President Richard Nixon, but that only lasted for 10 months, Dan. That was in 1974. Can you tell us why Congress reversed it?
It was a combination of things. I think first there was much happiness when that change first happened, but then there started to be anecdotal reports of all of the bad things about starting the day later in the winter. So rather than have the sun come out at 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. in some places, it was 9 a.m. And there were kids waiting for school buses in the dark. There were some anecdotal reports of traffic accidents as a result of the darker mornings. And before long, there were multiple efforts in Congress to very quickly reverse this policy that they had just enacted. So yes, it didn't even make it 1 year. And I think some of that may have been more driven by voter experience and anecdote than science. But either way, lawmakers who lived through that experience were more hesitant a few years ago to try it again. I think we've seen a little bit of a generational change in Congress where the older lawmakers who got all of the negative feedback 50 years ago, some of them have retired or phased out. And the younger lawmakers who haven't had that experience think it can be done again and this time better.
Mm. We have another guest joining us now, Dr. Swaroop Pinto, the Director of Pediatric Sleep Medicine at Akron Children's Hospital. Dr. Pinto, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Dr. Pinto, if we made daylight saving time permanent, we wouldn't necessarily feel it on November 1st here in Ohio specifically because sunrise would happen just before 8 a.m. based on years past data. But when winter gets deeper, days get shorter, we would see that by late December, sun would rise almost at 9 a.m. How would this later sunrise impact our bodies and our mood?
So, our sleep cycles, our sleep and wake cycles, are controlled by various cues like light and darkness, which are the major cues that control this whole cycle. And this is what we call a circadian rhythm. It's basically an internal biological clock. We also have different cues that help with our sleep wake cycles, like we have the sun clock, which is the light and darkness, and then we have the social clock. The social clock is what we set and what we determine what time we want it to be. Now, all these three clocks, the internal biological clock, the sun clock, and the social clock, all have to be in sync with each other for an ideal situation to get adequate amount of sleep and undisturbed sleep. However, there are changes that happen, and one of the changes that occur is the daylight savings. And that basically alters our social clock, and that causes a dyssynchrony between the internal biological clock, the circadian rhythm, and then the social clock. Now, this causes basically a lot of disruption in sleep patterns because we're so used to our pattern, this rhythm. Now, that changes. And so, initially, usually, the first few days and the first few weeks are where we see the maximum effect. And because as you said, as we have longer, you know, times that we are in darkness, that does cause an effect on the sleep wake patterns and also affects various other biological systems. So, in the short term, it does cause problems with mood, especially in younger children, because they are sleep deprived or they haven't got enough of lightness to keep them alert. And in teenagers, also it causes a disruption in their pattern just because they're already chronically sleep deprived. And further sleep deprivation can cause a lot of problems, quite serious problems in their mood, psychological issues, also road traffic accidents, especially teenagers who are driving in the morning to go to their schools.
Mm. Just so we all are clear on what we're talking about here, because people can confuse daylight saving time and standard time. Daylight saving time is between March and November. It pushes sunrise back and then it pushes sunset back. So we've got the later sunrise and the later sunset happening right now during daylight savings time between March and November. What Congress is talking about right now, at least with this particular bill, the Sunshine Protection Act, is making that permanent all year round. Now, Heather, a 2020 study conducted over 20 a study conducted over 20 years ago found that the risk of fatal car accidents rises by 6% during daylight saving time. What are the safety concerns associated with the time change?
There's a lot of safety concerns, but when we talk about standardizing this time, especially when we talk about our winter months, we're going to be asking small children to be walking to the school either in complete darkness or in that dawn time, which is actually really hard for drivers to see small kids. The International Highway Safety Commission said that every time the time changes, we see about a 15% increase in pedestrian and bicycle fatalities. And oftentimes those are small children. And then we talk about our novice drivers, our teenagers who maybe don't have that experience already to navigate in challenging situations where it's low light or low visibility. And then we add sleep changes and lack of sleep. And we see a higher incidence of teen crashes during that time as well.
Okay. And just to clarify, that was a study that was conducted over a 20-year period that came out in 2020 that showed that 6% increase in car accidents, fatal car accidents during daylight saving time. Now, Scott, what are your and other public educators' thoughts on daylight saving time? What do you think about a move to make it permanent?
I think that there's a lot of concern, especially with just the data that's being shared here and the past experiences of what happened in the 70s and the safety of children. And I think, on top of mind, in addition to obviously education success, is obviously the safety of our kids in schools. And I think this would be really concerning and is concerning. I've talked with different superintendents. I've talked with different parents. I'm a parent myself. I was a former school board member. And really, we want to be setting up our schools and our kids and our teachers to have as much success as they can in the classroom. And this seems like it would be an effort that would add just yet another challenge in that classroom when we have plenty of challenges to manage already.
If you're just joining us here on The Sound of Ideas, we are talking about the effort in Congress right now to make daylight saving time permanent. This is the period right now between March and November where we push sunrise and sunset back 1 hour by adjusting our clocks. Of course, sunrise and sunset is happening whenever it happens. We're just adjusting our clocks to correspond to it. If you want to be a part of this conversation, the number is 866-578-0903. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org or send us a message on Instagram at The Sound of Ideas. We have a call now from Tim in Broadview Heights. Tim, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. It's talk about one or the other. Why not split the difference, fall back 30 minutes in the fall, and leave it there? What are the unforeseen consequences of a concept like that?
Thank you for the question. We appreciate that very much, Tim. And I will ask our sleep expert, Dr. Pinto, about that. Dr. Pinto, what do you think about that suggestion, splitting the difference there?
So I know that 1 hour and 30 minutes and all this sounds like it's a short time and our body should adjust. But what we're talking about is this change that happens chronically in our lives over years. And these changes, even that 1 hour, half an hour, just adds up to all the sleep deprivation and sleep disturbances that we see in children. And over time, there are studies that show that chronically, when you have these constant changes that occur with our sleep patterns, they can cause effects on your heart and leading to increased strokes, heart attacks, hospital admissions, again, road traffic accidents, moods, especially with moods. It's very important because during their formative years, if these constant changes cause an effect on their mood, we are seeing children with a lot of psychological problems. So definitely, a lot of change is not what we want. We do want consistent bedtimes, and that's what the American Academy of Sleep Medicine promotes, is having consistent bedtime and consistent wake time, and in relation to your light exposure.
Okay. We did send our engaged journalism reporter out to Public Square, that's Richard Cunningham, to ask people what they thought about a permanent daylight saving time. Here's what they said.
I like it the way it is. Hope it stays the same.
What we have now is perfect and it should never change. I like daylight to last long. And I like to feel like when I wake up, it's still light and it's not like 3 in the morning.
You know what? I'm sure that there's studies to prove either way which one's better. If you can just make the sunshine stay out in Cleveland a lot longer, that's what I'm for. Once it's dark, it's dark. Once it's light, it's light. So it's like, you deal with it.
Does seem there is a little bit of confusion about daylight saving time. We did hear some person saying there that they wanted the sun to shine longer, but they also didn't want it to be dark when they wake up. And those two things are in conflict because with daylight saving time, you are pushing back the time that we experience sunrise and then also pushing back the time that we experience sunset. So, Dan, I want to ask you, does that confusion make this hard for lawmakers and citizens to talk about this and also for reporting on this topic?
Well, there was a moment, I want to say it was about a year and a half ago, when President Trump said he wanted to end, I think, daylight saving time, but that's not really what he wanted. He wanted to end the clock changes around daylight saving time and go to permanent daylight saving time. So there was some confusion there. And yes, reporting on this the past couple of years, I have been struck by people who might want year-round daylight saving time but don't know how to express that. I will say that the lawmakers who are deeply involved in this do understand the issue, do understand the difference between standard time and daylight saving time. There has also been a counter push from some physicians and a handful of lawmakers to go for permanent standard time, not permanent daylight time. So that has arisen as a result. But I think at the end of the day, in all the polls I've seen, people agree they don't like the clock changes. The challenge is they don't necessarily agree or even know what they want to replace the clock changes. So this has a lot of political momentum in part, but the solution may end up antagonizing and annoying just as many people as it did 50 years ago.
Is this a bit of a battle between the morning people and the night people? You know, we've heard from Dr. Pinto here saying that the daylight waking hours are important. So are you getting up earlier and going to bed earlier and less affected by this? Are you getting up later and going to bed later and maybe more affected by this? Becomes a question that we have to look at here. If you're just joining us here on The Sound of Ideas, we are talking about the prospect of making daylight saving time permanent. It is a bill that has passed in the U.S. House. It has the support of President Donald Trump. Again, when we talk about daylight saving time, we're talking about the period between March and November where we push the time that we experience sunrise and the time that we experience sunset back by adjusting our clocks. If you want to be part of this conversation, the number is 866-578-0903. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org. You can send us a message on Instagram at The Sound of Ideas. We have a couple of audience emails that I'd like to share. We have one from Daryl in Euclid who talks about walking to elementary school. Darren writes, "Walking to elementary school with it pitch dark outside was a grand adventure. My parents were more concerned with our safety. Several of us had flashlights so we could better see and so drivers could see us. So what would be different now?" And Scott, let me ask you about that from a public safety perspective. Are there factors that are different today than were present in generations past when we think about the safety issues when it comes to changing the time that sunrise would happen?
Well, I would imagine we've got more students that are driving to school today than we did in the past. Certainly more traffic on the road. I think the activity that kids are involved in is certainly more complex. So after school, they're much busier. Having high school kids years ago, they were up late working on, whether it was homework and so they had their after school activities and then they were up late. And I think that's kind of consistent for so many kids. And so I think there's just this ever evolving busy life of students today. And then you couple that with the changes of how many kids are driving to school and the kids that would be walking at the younger ages. And, I think there would just be some more health risks, some more challenges. And then again, the more struggles in the classroom itself to achieve the ultimate goal of education.
We have an email now in from Jacqueline. Jacqueline writes, "So I was wondering if the accidents occurring within the first couple weeks or so of time change." So Jacqueline is referring to the study that we mentioned earlier, where there's a 6% increase in fatal car accidents during daylight saving time. So Jacqueline says, "I was wondering if the accidents occur within the first couple of weeks or so of this time change, and mentioned that our speaker was talking about consistency and constancy. So Jacqueline says, currently we've been switching back and forth if it's not constant, but if our bodies adjust to one way or another, that wouldn't necessarily be consistent over time. So I think what Jacqueline's getting at there is, are those increase in accidents happening earlier in the time shift and less over the time as it goes on?
And I'm not sure about your specific study that you had cited, but the one with the International Highway Safety Commission is that in that first 5 weeks, we see that big spike, but then they continue throughout that time change. And to the point as well, to the previous caller about what's the difference between then versus now, we have a lot more distractions. We have folks on their phone, we have kids walking on their phone or having headphones in, not paying attention to traffic. And as well, then we add in e-bikes and e-scooters and walking and biking to school independently without caregivers. And that's a big change from what it used to be.
Okay. Another email now in from David, and I'll direct this to Dr. Pinto. David writes, if the change between standard time and daylight time is the cause of dire health issues, is there also data showing that business travel, in which one can experience a time change of several hours, also indicates similar health issues? David shares, I worked at a multinational company in a supply chain role where coworkers often traveled to China, India, and Europe for extended periods with no mention of health issues. Dr. Pinto, do you have a response to that from David?
Yeah. So I think what David is referring to is the jet lag. And the jet lag is basically a little bit of asynchrony between your social clock and then your body, right? It's nothing got to do with the sun. So the lightness and the light part exposure and darkness, that does not change. It's just the timing that changes. And that change usually happens quicker than this change that happens over time. So the effects that we talk about, the chronic health effects, is when you have this chronic changes that occur over and over again over a lifespan. So when you have jet lag, you travel to another space part, you get a different, it takes a couple of days and then you get used to it because there is no change in your light exposure and your dark exposure. Whereas with your daytime savings and your standard time, there is a difference because you're basically changing the time and the time that the sun rises and the sun sets.
Another email now in from Rich. This is directed to Heather. If the increase in accidents that we mentioned, could it be because individuals drive faster in spring and summer than they do in the winter when roads are snowy and icy?
It's a good question. And I think, too, some of it comes to, as Dr. Pinto had said, that change. We know that drowsy driving is a big risk, especially for our novice drivers, but also for our adults. And so if we are changing our sleep patterns, getting less sleep, having lower light conditions, those are layers of issues and safety concerns that just compound on each other. And so we continue to see, especially when we fall back on time, it's harder to see when the roads are snowy and icy. And if we continue to standard time, where it's very dark in the morning, that's going to add an additional challenge because Northeast Ohio, it's snowy and icy sometimes, and it's easier to see that in daylight versus darkness when most of us are going to be traveling to work and school.
We have a short and sweet email from Barb. Barb says, keep daylight saving time all year, please. As I mentioned, if we think about this between a battle between the morning people and the night people, I would personally, selfishly say daylight saving time would be better for my life. It's hard for me to wrap that around some of the health and safety concerns that we're thinking about for other people. But for me personally, I'm a nighttime person. I would like the sun to rise a little bit later so that I can experience more daylight during the day. Scott, I want to ask you about the impact that this might have on extracurricular activities and sports if there were to be daylight saving time on a permanent basis. Would that make it easier or more difficult for students in the after-school hours for extracurriculars?
I think right now that most of the stadiums that they're playing in, or gymnasiums for that matter, but when it's an outside sport, typically there's lights, and when we start say our fall sports in the season, we can pretty much finish a game and still have lightness out there. And obviously, as it ends towards the end of the season, we're relying more on those stadium lights. So I don't really think that's going to be as much of an impact. Really, I think it's going to be more of that morning hours for the kids who are getting up and having to get to school, and not having that sunlight kick the melatonin in gear or actually shut it down, so that they begin to actually wake up and their brains are actually ready to enter the classroom and make magic happen.
We have a question now from Jeff in Chagrin Falls, and this gets to the point that there are a lot of ways to build a ship. And Scott, this question will be for you.
Sure.
If walking or driving to school in the dark is a safety concern, wouldn't schools consider pushing start times back by an hour if the change is made? So we would just not be adjusting our clocks, but we would just be adjusting our lifestyles,
Sure.
basically, based on sunrise and sunset.
Yeah, and that's definitely an option. I think that would need to be a pretty significant community lift, and not just for a single community. Because when you think about our schools, they are, back to the sports question, or in the district I'm in, we have a 6-district compact where there's a lot of collaboration between different districts and the education of kids. Parents would need to adjust. So work schedules would need to adjust. And there's been plenty of evidence that even for our high school students now, it would be much better for them to start their school days later because their brains are wired because of that sleep deprivation. But that would require a significant shift from essentially a business world as well to accommodate for parents to be able to do that. And for that to happen, I think it can't just be a decision that's done on a legislative level. It really needs to be a community-wide discussion, and that decision needs to bubble up from the bottom and not be dropped in from the top. So.
Just posing a thought here. Couldn't we all culturally just decide to start our days later? That way the people
Sure.
that wanted to experience sunrise could do it, and the people that wanted to experience a later sunset would be okay with that.
I would be okay with that.
Maybe something to think about. 10 a.m.? 10 a.m. sounds nice. Don't you want to listen to the sound of ideas at maybe like 11 a.m.? I'm going to hear from my bosses on that one. I want to ask you, Dr. Pinto, about that question, though, that our emailer asked about potentially pushing back the start day of a school. We are talking about sleep cycles and consistency with schedules in terms of when sunrise and sunset are experienced by us. Do you think that would just create the same problems under a different umbrella?
No, it wouldn't cause any problems. So basically, when I started this conversation, I talked about the circadian rhythm. So the circadian rhythm is in sync with the sun and the darkness. So if we change school timings or our work life patterns based on sunrise and sunset, that would be the ideal way the human body would like to function. That would just give enough time for the melatonin secretion and also other hormones like cortisol. So basically, it'll prevent from many problems that occur with sleep deprivation. Now, as Scott was talking about teenagers, yes, there has been a lot of discussion over the last maybe more than 10 years about start times later for teenagers, just because they have a phenomenon called this delayed sleep phase, where their brains just want to sleep later and later because of the change in their body. And we telling them to get up at this particular time but in the dark is not helping the cause. So they're going to be sleep deprived. They're not going to be able to function in school. They're going to be bad drivers. So a lot of things will go wrong, and we've been pushing for that. So if that happens, that would be great. But again, that is a full culture change, and a lot of situations have to change. Right, work has to change. Public transport has to change. So a big change has to occur for that thing to be function. But if that were to occur, that would be the ideal situation.
Dan, you did mention that there is a push by some people in Congress, U.S. Representative for Pennsylvania Mary Gay Scanlon, for example, to make standard time permanent. Does this bill have a promising chance? Do you think that there's likelihood of one over the other potentially making it to becoming law?
I would put my money on the Sunshine Protection Act. I mean, I think it's risky for any journalist to predict the future, but we know that this permanent daylight saving time bill has years of work behind it, building coalitions. It has President Trump's approval. President Trump, who has his own preferences on sun as a golf course owner from Florida, so someone who might stand to benefit in that respect. Whereas the standard time folks just, I think, have an uphill battle. Their bill is new. They haven't spent the years building alliances. If they may well succeed eventually if people have a backlash to permanent daylight saving time if we get it, but I think they have a lot of work to do still.
All right. We have one more caller from Keith in North Royalton. Keith, welcome to the Sound of Ideas. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call. I don't think anybody's realizing that it's the same planet at the same angle going around the sun. And at some point, no matter which one we're on, we're going to have dark in the morning when you're going to work and dark when you're coming home, which seems to be the big argument that everyone has for staying on daylight savings time. eventually you're going to have that no matter what.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Keith. That is true. We do know even in those periods between March and November, the time for sunrise and sunset does fluctuate as well as it does between November and March. We'll continue to follow this and see what happens. I want to thank our panel for participating with us today. Dan Diamond, White House reporter with the Washington Post. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. My best to all my friends in Cleveland.
We appreciate you very much. Also, Dr. Swarup Pinto, Director of Pediatric Sleep Medicine at Akron Children's Hospital. Thank you, Dr. Pinto.
Thank you for having me.
With me here in studio, Scott Carlo, Executive Director of the Ohio Public School Advocacy Network. Scott, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Also, Heather Trunka, Injury Prevention Manager with Akron Children's Hospital. Heather, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll take a quick break now, and when we come back, we'll hear from the CEO of the Cuyahoga County Public Library, who's now leading a nationwide library advocacy organization. This is The Sound of Ideas. I'm Stephanie Haney. We'll be right back. You're with The Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thank you for staying with us. The Cuyahoga County Public Library System serves over 700,000 cardholders at its 27 branches located throughout Northeast Ohio. While CCPL has been on the receiving end of plenty of national praise over the years, library systems across the country are facing unique challenges, from discussions about the reduction or elimination of property taxes, which are their primary source of funding, to continued pressure to remove controversial books and materials. Jamar Rahming joined Cuyahoga County Public Library as the CEO just under 1 year ago in August of 2025, and was just recently elected as the president of the Public Library Association. That's a nationwide library advocacy organization. Jamar joins us now on The Sound of Ideas to not only talk about his first year at CCPL, but also his new role at the PLA. Jamar, thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much. I'm honored and glad to be here.
We appreciate it. If our audience would like to join this conversation, you can give us a call at 866-578-0903. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org, or you can message us on Instagram at The Sound of Ideas. Now, Jamar, as you close in on 1 year as CEO of the Cuyahoga County Public Library, how are you feeling about the work you've done so far and what's to come, generally speaking?
Well, I feel very optimistic and enthusiastic. Optimism just stems from the fact that we are just busier than ever. We had close to 4 million library visits. We hosted 134 author visits, with majority of those being New York Times bestselling authors, which included Malcolm Gladwell, Ian McEwan, Patrick Radden Keefe. We served nearly 40,000 after school meals to kids, and so the work that we're doing is strengthening strengthening communities, providing sanctuary space for kids, because many of our communities there's nothing else for the kids to do after school, and so the library is serving as the intellectual, social, and recreational hub of the community. Mm-hmm. So we're excited about that. So we're optimistic about that. We've had to really be very aggressive in developing library advocacy, and reminding our constituents of the utilitarian value that libraries hold in communities. As there's just been a mass movement in the state of Ohio, to repeal property taxes. The Cuyahoga County Library System, 70% of our revenue comes from property taxes. So if property taxes vanished, there'd be no Cuyahoga County, Public Library. We would not be able to offer the valuable services that we offer.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Jamar, you touched on many things that we're going to ask about in a bit more detail as we continue our conversation here. So thank you for setting us up so nicely mm-hmm. for that. I do want to ask you a bit about your background as mm-hmm. we dive into things here. You served in library systems in Wilmington, Delaware, Austin, Oregon, and South Carolina, now here. Uh-huh. So a year at the Cuyahoga County Public Library, but 2 decades in the library system, yes. Certainly. What inspired you to get into library services?
Well, I guess the short version is that when I was a kid in 3rd grade, I have a sordid past. This was before YouTube. Me and my cousins, we would sneak up at night and watch HBO because there were naughty things on HBO at night, and we were kids and we were just curious. And we snuck up at night and we watched this biopic of the Josephine Baker story with Lynn Whitfield. and we knew that this new lady was going to be on TV dancing, but we did not realize that we were going to be that her story would just captivate us. I mean, this was a woman that had to flee to Europe for equal opportunities because she couldn't perform in certain venues in the United States. She couldn't eat in restaurants that she wanted to eat in. And then she fought for the French resistance. So she was a spy against Hitler. She adopted 12 children from different races. And so her story just, we were, this was the late 80s. I mean, we hadn't heard of, segregation, of Jim Crow laws, of discrimination, and people not being able to have equal rights. And so I went to my school library to find a book on Josephine Baker, and there wasn't one. So as a third grader, I wrote a letter to the school superintendent, and the school superintendent was taken aback that a kid would write a letter about a book not being in the library. So he put a book about Josephine Baker in every school library in Denver Public Schools.
Wow.
And so that's how I got into the industry. I had a gumption, fervor, and a drive to make sure that all stories were properly told and curated, and to just be a good steward and gatekeeper of information. And so now I'm in a position where I'm empowering other people, to do so, and doing it successfully in the digital age.
Sure, which presents its own unique challenges.
Yes.
Now, I want to ask you about the size of Cuyahoga County Public Library compared to some of the operations that you've been a part of in the past. We know that as of last spring, Cuyahoga County Public Library had an operating budget of $94.5 million, more than 900 full-time and part-time employees. How does the size of this operation compare to the previous systems that you've been a part of?
It's probably it's substantially larger than the system that I came from, but I've worked in large library systems similar to the size of Cuyahoga County. But I would say this is by far the most diverse constituency that I've served with us, serving 27 different cities and 47 different communities. And in our Parma hub, I mean, the city of Parma has the highest Ukrainian population next to Ukraine, in the world. And so that's here in Cuyahoga, County. We have a heavy Polish, community, Slavic. Our Beechwood community is heavy Jewish. We have a 30% African American community. We've got a Puerto Rican. Cuyahoga County is a melting pot, and so my staff now, it challenges us, but it energizes us because we have to find very, very, robust and innovative ways to serve all the constituents in Cuyahoga County, well, but also to respect all of the individual cultural differences. So we not only have to do our work and be innovative, but we also have to have a high degree of cultural competency as we plan and execute programs that please the customers.
Sure. If you're just joining us here on The Sound of Ideas, we are talking with Jamar Rahming. He is the CEO of the Cuyahoga County Public Library, recently elected the president of the Public Library Association, which is a national organization that advocates for libraries. If you'd like to join this conversation, you can call us at 866-578-0903. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org, or you can message us on Instagram at The Sound of Ideas. Maybe you have a story you'd like to share about an experience you had at a Cuyahoga County Public Library branch. Maybe you'd like to share why libraries are important to you, something you'd like to see in your local library, whatever it is. We'd love to have you be a part of this conversation. Now, congratulations to you, Jamar, on being elected president of the Public Library Association. We'd love for you to tell us a little bit about the work of the PLA.
Yeah, well, we have over 9,000 members, and so we're an advocacy organization for all the public libraries in the United States. And so we empower and help public libraries across the nation navigate all these paradigm shifts in technology. I mean, as technology continues to amass rapidly. There's always critics and cynics that say, well, why do we need brick and mortar, public libraries when we have, devices? But public libraries across the nation are busier than ever, and more needed than ever. So we devote our time advocating for libraries. There's been an upsurge in intellectual freedom issues and censorship challenges, and so we help our people within our network navigate those challenges. And we also have a biannual conference to where it's a convening every 2 years where we get every public librarian in the nation is at one place at one time for a moment of sharpening and shaping and networking and professional development. So our biannual conference, navigating just the heavy political waters that libraries are in right now, intellectual freedom issues, and also just coming up with just more industrious and ingenious ways of serving our constituents, better, so that we can remain indispensable entities in our communities.
We do have an email now in from AW in Oberlin. AW asks, is the Public Library Association less or more agile than its parent organization, the American Library Association? AW says she's asking this because she wants to know which organization should I focus on if I want to start a nationwide initiative the fastest.
Okay. Well, the Public Library Association, actually, we're an umbrella organization of the American Library Association. So we're kind of a organization of the American Library Association. So we're kind of one. We work in tandem with ALA. But PLA is just more, there's just more specificity. I mean, it's really targeted for people who work in public libraries.
People may not realize there are different kinds of libraries.
Yes,
so
yes.
Public libraries specifically.
So we're an exclusive organization. We're exclusive. Where ALA is more focuses on the entire industry. Where if you're a medical librarian, a law librarian, an academic librarian, but PLA, we are exclusively for public librarians.
Thank you for clarifying that for us. Thank you for the comment, AW in Oberlin. If you do want to be a part of this conversation, you can call 866-578-0903. You can also email us at soi@ideastream.org or message us on Instagram at The Sound of Ideas. If you missed it, we are talking with Jamar Rahming, who is the CEO of the Cuyahoga County Public Library and is also the newly taken office elected president of the Public Library Association, which is a nationwide library advocacy organization. Jamar, I want to mention the fact that you did come into the Cuyahoga County Public Library and also to the leadership of the PLA at an interesting political time. There are political challenges and discussions happening both nationally and statewide here in Ohio. How are you dealing with state funding cuts, which is something that we've seen here in Ohio, one of the two primary sources of the library funding?
Well, I think that this is just a moment to where we're just working aggressively to develop, advocacy. I mean, this is a time to where all of we have 540,000, library holders, and we probably have over, 1 million people that use our branches on a regular basis. And so the work that we're doing now is to have library users, migrate from just being mere library users to library advocates and library activists. And so we have launched a public awareness campaign just to remind our constituents of our value in the community, the services that we offer, and the return of investment that they're getting on their tax dollars. I mean, just an example. I mean, the average Cuyahoga County taxpayer pays about $74 a year for their public library. So if you download a handful of ebooks a year, you've spent more than $74. If you attend a couple of programs, or you check out several books a year, or you check out a bicycle, or you use our innovation centers multiple times, I mean, you've spent more than $74. So it's just so what we've done, we've taken more of an offensive approach, and that is just to launch this public awareness campaign that just reminds constituents of how valuable we are, the return of investment that they're getting on their tax dollars, and also to engage people who are not aware of our services. I mean, there's a lot of people that don't realize that you can go in any Cuyahoga County Public Library and get a passport if you need one. Mm-hmm. You can go to many of our branches and check out, a a bicycle if you need one. I mean, we had a young lady that couldn't afford a prom dress, so she went to our Fiber Optics Innovation Center and designed her prom dress. And that was such
Wow.
that resonated so much with her community that people started asking her to design their prom dresses, and she started a small business out of the public libraries. So the public libraries, I mean, we enhance the economic vitality, of our communities. We offer workforce, development skills, and that is our narrative. And I think that is a narrative that resonates on both sides of the political spectrum. And so we're just trying to, the best thing that we can do in this time where everything is so politicized is to control our narrative and to demonstrate to both sides of the political aisle that we are in alignment with what they're trying to do to serve their constituents better. That the public library is for everybody.
One of the things I want to ask you about, because we have talked about this extensively here at IdeaStream Public Media, is property taxes. We know that it's something that a lot of homeowners are feeling strain from as property evaluations go up and property taxes rise. We've heard from multiple homeowners who are in their golden years that they may not be able to keep their homes and they are being priced out of it with property taxes. How do you respond to concerns from property owners about that financial strain, with property taxes being a big piece of the funding for public libraries?
Well, I think that, I stand corrected if my numbers are slightly off, but like what you pay for public libraries, like I say, the average property tax owner pays $74 a year. In their $74 a year, their property taxes goes to libraries. So that's less than a percent. It's less than 1%. So property, so the property tax owners, I mean, very little of their revenue, very little of that revenue goes to public libraries.
Public libraries. So it's a big piece of the public library funding, but not necessarily a large chunk of the property tax pool.
And we take. I mean, we appreciate that money. We're not. I mean, no money is too little.
Sure.
In this day and age. But when you look at the big picture of a homeowner who's paying, if they're paying $4,000 a year in property taxes and $74 that goes to the libraries. The library is not the one that's carrying the heavy tax burden.
Sure.
And we're taking that $74 and we are creating transformative life experiences for our constituents. We're strengthening communities. We are enhancing the economic vitality of Cuyahoga County. We're providing extracurricular activities and safety nets and sanctuary spaces. For children, we're helping small businesses thrive and flourish, and we're just enhancing the quality of life of people who live in the greater Cleveland area.
Jamar, we have about 2 minutes left. I want to ask you about something that's a serious issue for public libraries, that's certain books and materials, conversations about banning them. This seems like something that may resonate with you based on your origin story of your interest in public libraries. So how are you weathering that?
Well, you know what, we have a collection development, policy. I mean, we do stand on, the tenet that as the gatekeeper of information, it's our responsibility to provide the resources and permit the information consumer to make the final rendering in terms of what information should be censored or shouldn't be censored. We have a collection development policy. If people find material that they think that is questionable or dangerous, or we give opportunity for them to challenge the material, and we vet it and we weigh it against our collection development policies, and we do at times there is room for reconsideration, but we hold firm to the fact that we provide the resources and it's up to the information consumer to make the final rendering.
I want to ask you quickly about some of the things that are coming up for the Cuyahoga County Public Library, particularly at Parma Heights and Beechwood.
Yes. Well, we just opened up our new Parma Heights Library, and we're just so excited about it. This library is so unique because there's a child care center inside the library, and the early child care providers who will be servicing this daycare are getting their certification at Tri-C. So the library has created just a vibrant, robust early literacy ecosystem, and so we're excited about that. We're going to be breaking ground in our new Beechwood library next spring, and that's going to have an auditorium. So we're going to be able to expand where we have our author visits and author talks. Cause
Lots of opportunities for programming.
lots
there.
of opportunities to engage and serve our community constituents better.
Jamar, I want to thank you so much for being with us. Jamar Rahming, the CEO of the Cuyahoga County Public Library and the president of the Public Library Association. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
We appreciate it. If you missed any part of today's show, the rebroadcast will be tonight at 9 on 89.7 WKSU, and you can find every episode of The Sound of Ideas wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. To get the last word on today's topics, email us at soi@ideastream.org and find us on Instagram at The Sound of Ideas. Yesterday, we shared another one of our Easy Day Away segments where we highlight places that still feel like a getaway but don't require an overnight stay, making the planning and the price nice. This time we talked about Dayton and Yellow Springs, and Betsy wrote in with this travel tip. The hidden gem in Dayton, Ohio is the International Peace Museum. Thank you for that, Betsy. Tomorrow on The Sound of Ideas, we'll drill into allegations of assault against Ohio Representative Max Miller, plus learn more about a women's decathlon event that's coming to Oberlin. I'm Stephanie Haney. Thanks for keeping the conversation going. We'll see you tomorrow on The Sound of Ideas.